Hey, this is Dave Dunlop. You're on BackstageAxxess.com, where the real show begins.
We could start out with, kind of the current state of, the recordings. You've had a solo album out, and, Red Stein came out with Rick with all those different guest appearances, and I guess we'll start with, your solo album. I mean, this really was the first one that you've done just on your own, correct?
Yeah, I've done, I had my band, The Full Nine, in the sort of early 2000s, and then, Rick and I have done, as you know, we've done a few records together, but I never really got around to doing my own just because I was always busy producing and working on others with other people, right? So I had amassed this sort of little library of tunes, and I had realized when I was going out and doing my own shows, because I also do shows with orchestras on my own, right, like sort of symphonic rock shows, I realized that I never had my own CD to sell at the merch tables, which seemed kind of ridiculous to me, So I finally last year got around to recording and finishing it and doing it, and I got it done sort of just in time to start working on the Resolution 9 record. So it was good timing, It was just time I did my own record, and it just so happened that that followed up with the Rick record. So it ended up being obviously a pretty busy year, pretty productive year too. So with those two records both kind of coming out roughly around the same time. So yeah, I'm just glad I finally got to just do my own thing, because years of just doing other people's stuff, So it was time, basically that's it.
And you and I, again, we kind of grew up in that era with that cycle. You'd have an album, you'd tour it, and you have another album. It was like year after year after year.
Yeah,
and a lot of these guys have kind of slowed down. What did you, going into the studio? Did you get kind of caught up in taking your time because it was your first, or did you have more of a hey man, let's just get this thing done?
No, actually, once I decided I was going to do it, and I kind of had I'd say I had more than half of the material written. I went hardcore for like a month, for 6 weeks. I sort of put a deadline on myself to get it done, partly because I knew that I was going to be diving knee deep into the Rick record, and so that was it was just good motivation for me to get mine done. So I literally started tracking my stuff, and then got on a real roll and ended up writing half the record in like 4 to 6 weeks. So half of it was written, and then I just went crazy for 6 weeks. Because the studio's in my house, right? It's pretty easy to get to my studio from the kitchen, you know what I'm saying? So it was just easy to, during the week when I wasn't gigging, just be down in my studio sort of 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, So it happened, once I decided to do it, it happened really quick.
Yeah, and then, it's interesting. You mentioned having the home studio, and I guess in some ways, I know when I try to work at home, it can be a bit distracting, but you went from that environment to Metalworks, which, if I remember correctly, you guys wound up at Metalworks because Rick's home studio was damaged by a flood or something like that.
Yeah, I think initially the thought to do the Rick record was to sort of do it some in my studio, some in his studio. We always knew we were going to do the drums in a place like Metalworks, but then he had some problems with his studio. But then Gil Moore was gracious enough to just sort of say, hey, our Gil still owns Metalworks, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he just said, our door's open, come on in. And so we ended up spending way more time at Metalworks than we thought we would. I did a lot of my guitars I probably did all my guitars at my studio and a lot of the background vocals at my studio. But other than that, a lot of his record was done at Metalworks.
I know you played on stage with Triumph for a couple of shows, but honestly, Metalworks, as a guy, I'm a guy who grew up a huge Triumph fan. That must have just been like a Beatles fan going to Abbey Road,
I know, yeah. No, it was, the whole experience was surreal at Metalworks, because, it was surreal for Rick too. I'm sure, I don't know if you said, but it was a reunion for him in a lot of ways going back in there too, right? So, and then for me, just, reading the stories about Progressions of Power, or when they started recording at Metalworks, Allied Forces and stuff, yeah, it was cool, and it was cool to spend more time there than we thought we would, right? Because we thought we'd just be in there for a few days tracking drums, but we ended up being there a lot. So yeah, you know, and seeing Gil again and saying hi to Gil and seeing Mike again, for me it was like a little reunion too, right? Because you know, I hadn't seen those guys. I mean, Mike and I get together for coffee once a year, hang out, but I don't see Gil that often, so it was cool.
And you know, I mean, I'm wondering with Resolution 9, like how much of an impact did the studio have on the album, do you think? I mean, do you think it would have been a very different album if it had been recorded like you originally planned and not spent so much time at Metalworks?
That's, you know, it's really hard to say. Definitely, we tracked some of it to tapes, so we tracked some of it analog. So in terms of the sound of the record, there's definitely an old school organic sound to a lot of it just because of the gear we used, you know. So I would say that way, yes, it's different than it would have been if we had just done the sort of modern digital route in home studios. There's no doubt about that. In terms of you know, creating the parts and stuff, it's so hard to say, you know. I will say that there was one day in there where we were tracking a lot of his guitar solos, and I mean, he was on fire, and I'm going to guess that part of it was, you know, maybe there was some nostalgia for him, right? Being in that room again and tracking guitars in that room, and he had this killer day where he did a lot of his guitar solos, and who knows, maybe he was so on that day, maybe he was partly inspired from the past. I mean, you listen to some of the guitar solos on the record, and it seems like he was inspired by some of his past, you know? So, yeah, you know, there might be something to that.
Yeah, I'd say Rick is one of those. My son, I took him to see him first time when he was just like a solo acoustic show back in, man, I want to say late 90s, maybe mid 90s. Yeah. And I don't know, I've never seen the guy have an off night. I mean, it's funny, I read like he would post some things about how, you know, the guitar was sticky or whatever, but man, the guy just seems like it looks really easy, but I feel like Rick puts a lot of work into staying a great guitarist.
Yeah, I think he's always playing at home. He's got guitars around, and he's always picking up his guitars, you know. So, but there's definitely something to that too. But you know, he's a pro. He's been doing it for a lot of years. You know, I mean, I had him in to play on my record to play a guitar solo, and you know, he might have been there for 45 minutes and played this great solo, just because you know, that sort of classic rock and roll guitar guy is in him, right? So he can bring it out pretty quickly and pretty easily. So, you know, he's consistent for sure.
And I mean, actually, that transitions, you know, very nicely into kind of the next theme. I mean, Resolution 9's first time Rick really revisited the kind of classic rock genre, maybe, you know, the Airtime record, which I don't think you were involved in, but
no.
It's been a long time, and man, it still seems like it's just there, like it was a natural thing to get back into. But why do you think he's sort of avoided that post, maybe, like, I want to say, ipso facto? I mean, it really just has not been. He hasn't been a classic rock artist since then.
No, I mean, you know, he still rocks when we do the live band shows here and there, right? It's not like he hasn't been doing that live, but in terms of recording, I think that there are a couple of different reasons. One of them is because literally Mascot Records came to him with an offer he couldn't refuse to do a rock record. I mean, that's part of it, right? So I think it gave him the boost to go, oh, yeah, you know, I think I do have a rock record inside me. And he was writing some stuff at the time. Maybe by coincidence, he just happened to be writing some riff rock. So I think the two things, just timing is so much a part of it, right? So the combination of he happened to be writing some of these themes, and this record label came to him and said, hey, I'll give you some money if you do a rock record. So I just think it was the timing of those two things happening, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, with a guy that's got in his back pocket songs like Magic Power, Hold On, Fight the Good Fight, all those great Triumph numbers, and man, these beautiful solo works that Can Let Me Be the One, and so many other. Human Race, when I heard, I mean, I didn't know if he had any more songs that were just blow me out of the water great, but Human Race is just an amazing, amazing song from the first millisecond that you listen to. And I guess you had a pretty big part in that song, if I remember talking about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of built the guitars at home. Other than we recorded Alex's rhythm guitar at Metalworks, Alex Lifeson. You've heard of that guy, right? He's a pretty good guitar player.
No,
and,
is he a local Toronto guy? I'm not sure who he is. No, just
yeah, more or less. I think he is. I think he's this Canadian kid that's done all right, But so we tracked his 12-string strummy stuff at Metalworks, and then I kind of took the tracks home and I kind of built the guitars, like the guitar solos and stuff. I did sort of this almost like tribute to Allman Brothers kind of harmony guitar, actually sort of a cross between Allman Brothers and Boston, if you can imagine that. The harmony guitars and stuff. So yeah, I mean, Rick kind of sort of let me have fun with some of the guitars on that track. But it's a great track. It's a great drum track. It's a great vocal track. It's just a good sort of pop rock song, So Rick pulled some stuff out of the old, he wrote some really nice stuff for that record. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I don't know that Rick's ever written a bad record. I mean, I'm one of the guys that's just followed that whole solo career. I mean, Marco's Secret Songbook probably isn't on a lot of people's radar, but there's some just absolutely beautiful songs on that record.
Yeah, for sure. He's always writing. He's a writer by heart,
To go back to, maybe a little reflection on Triumph, because we're about the same age, and I know you kicked around the album Progressions of Power. That was actually the first Triumph album I bought. A lot of people kind of push that one off as not one of the highlights of their catalog, but I love it. I'm just curious what you think of that, because it's not one that gets played a lot live, and even in Rick's set.
I discovered him right when Just a Game came out, so that was the one before, right? Progression. Right. So I discovered Just a Game, and I wore that one out, and of course, because that made me a fan, the next one was Progression, so I bought that one, and then I think with Allied after that.
Yep.
So those are the three that at the time, it was current at the time more or less, and that's what I was listening to. And then I'm not sure. I think after that, I probably just veered in another direction. I mean, as soon as I got into Eddie Van Halen, it was like, okay, I love you, Rick, but I got to start listening to Eddie Van Halen. I always joke with him about that, and of course Rush too. Like Rush, Triumph, and Van Halen at that time were what I was listening to, And, but yeah, I mean, I like that. To me, that's the era that I like. It's Just a Game, Progressions, and Allied. That's where I think they were really kind of at the top of their game,
Did you get to see them live during that period? I mean, that live show.
Yeah, my first two shows, I lived in Manitoba. I lived on a military base. My dad was in the military. So the nearest town was Brandon, Manitoba, and my first two shows that I ever saw were Rush and Triumph. It was the Farewell to or Hemispheres tour Rush, and the Triumph tour would have been Just a Game, I guess. Yeah. So literally those were the first two shows I ever saw. I was probably, 14, something like that. And lo and behold, here I am in 2016, 17 in the studio with those two guys. So that's kind of bizarre in its own self,
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be incredible. And I must say, I haven't said it to this point, but you absolutely hold your own on stage. And I think Rick really understands and appreciates the chemistry between you, you two guitarists. And you even mentioned a guy like an Eddie Van Halen. I mean, who wants to play with Eddie Van Halen and who wants to play with Rick Emmett? But man, you just do amazing work up there together. Yeah,
it's a testament to being open to each other and also just years of doing it. I mean, man, I'm in my 21st year with him, right? And so it's just over the years. And between live shows and studio, I think we've developed a pretty good chemistry for sure.
And I mean, how did that happen? I mean, it's around 1990, what are you doing that all of a sudden you're hanging out with Rick Emmett, and here we are 21 years later, it's like Rick and Dave is they kind of roll off the tongue together.
I think it just happened organically. It started off as his keyboard player in his band couldn't do a gig, so I subbed in once, and that was kind of it. That was 96. And then the only break I had was when my band signed a big American deal with Hollywood Records, Mammoth Records, in 2000. So when we were on the road for a year or two, I was away from Rick's band, and then when that sort of all finished, I came back, and that's when we really started doing acoustic shows too, And so it's just organically happened, Never was really planned out. Just, hey, what do you want to do next? Let's do some acoustic stuff. And then, here we are back to the electric rock stuff. It just happens,
Had you been familiar at all with the kind of the mellower Rick Emmett type stuff? The post ipso facto.
Yeah, because when I joined the band, he had just put out I think it was called Spiral Notebook. So that was after ipso facto, right?
Yep.
So through the years, I mean, when he's been releasing, before we started working in the studio together, and he was releasing, rock quartet and stuff, I was obviously having to learn the material for when we did do some band shows, and we even played some of that stuff acoustically, believe it or not, some of that rock quartet stuff. So I've just known about it all just through the years of basically learning some of it. I mean, if I think of the tunes that I played with him, it's probably most of the catalog at some point or another, We used to do acoustic shows where we would do 2 different shows in one night, and we wouldn't repeat one song. So we'd be doing most obscure stuff, So yeah, I mean, over the years, I've played pretty much everything, pretty sure. And now I got him playing some of my stuff, which is kind of sweet. He learned some of my stuff for our shows, which is really nice too,
Well, that's very cool. And I mean, what are you do the 2 different configurations. There's the kind of strung out troops model, and then the rock show, and whatnot. I mean, what do you have a favorite? Is it just you just love to play, or?
They're different. I like them for different reasons. The acoustic thing is fun because, we both get to take some pretty self-indulgent, nice long solos. So every night is different. Actually, the thing about acoustic that is almost the most fun is we have a good rapport, and we'd like to talk and joke with the audience a lot, right? So every night is different that way. It's just, because we're having fun with the audience. Whereas the band shows, it's more about the music, and there's no real talking between the songs. So I like the band shows because I'm still a rocker. I like to rock. I like to play the rock and roll, loud rock and roll with a loud amp, right? I mean, I'll always love that. But the acoustic shows are fun just for the intimate, talking to the audience and engaging with the audience. So they're both great in totally different ways. So it's nice to have both outlets,
Yeah, I mean, 3 Clouds Across the Moon, I think, is one that kind of jumps into both sets. And is that, my sense is that's very much, is that always an improvisational piece, a good portion of that? I mean, it seems like you stay
other than when he plays the melody, the first time, second time, it's all, the solos are never the same from night to night, and that's what keeps it interesting, right? Like literally, we're challenging each other every single night we do that song. Like when he introduces the song, he basically says, "Now we're going to kick each other's ass," and so, you got to be on your game, right? You got to go, okay, well, we're both going to try to kick each other's ass, so it's never the same each night, And in this day of Facebook Live and YouTube, man, you better be on your game because it's going to be up on the internet and it's incredible now. Like you do a show and there it is. It's just crazy. So yeah, you can't afford to let your guard down ever.
Yeah, that's a great song. It's still I just never get sick of that. I mean, the original recorded version is really cool, but just the improvisational nature of that song is fantastic.
Yeah. And even the band shows, we do that in the rock shows too quite often, and it's the same thing, improvising, but just in a rock vein. So that song also, and then our drummer gets to do a killer drum solo when we do the band show too with that tune.
Yeah, it really does work, and I know the band show really leans towards the Triumph material, but I think that's probably just kind of a promoter thing. But man, that song still, it just really plays well.
We're doing some of the new stuff from the new record in the show now, actually. So which is fun. We're doing Human Race in the rock band now, and we're doing Stand Still. So that stuff is creeping in now too, which is cool,
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. It Stand Still, that's the opening track, right?
Yeah.
Reminds me a ton of Drive Time. I mean, that kind of opening, from Drive Time from Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah, it does.
So
cross between Drive Time, and it's got a little bit of ZZ Top feel in it too,
Oh yeah, no doubt. I forget that there's a little bit of that. Rick just loves that kind of Texas blues because Triumph had a really good run in Texas. It still does. Yeah,
totally.
Just to wrap it up, because you've been super generous with your time, and I know you got to
no problem.
struggle with a bit of a cold. But last question: do you ever try to sneak in maybe a little more obscure deep cut from the Triumph catalog into the set? I know you've played Blinding Light Show like on a whim in front of a Texas audience at one point, and
it's so hard now because there's stuff that we've got to play that fans want to hear, and who can blame them, right? I mean,
right.
It's just hard to. I mean, because there's the new record too. Now we feel obligated. We want to put some of the new stuff in there, right? So then again, you got to take stuff out. So it's always, adding by extraction, and it's hard. So to get an obscure tune in there means, okay, well, something has to come out. So it's a tricky juggling thing, So, I mean, who knows what'll happen, right? I mean, maybe we will, because we've got some shows coming up. We're going to do some rehearsing, so we'll see what happens,
Yeah, I guess it is the ultimate catch-22 because, I mean, as many times as I've seen Rick, I don't know if I'll ever get sick of Magic Power. I mean, it's one of those songs.
Yeah, it's just there's some songs that are his calling cards that it would be not fair to not do them on a show,
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, well, Dave, thank you so much. I haven't seen any Western New York, Buffalo, Rochester / dates in a while. Do you know if anything's coming up or in the works?
I know there's a I mean they're starting to try to work on getting more band shows, but I know there's a duo show in Buffalo coming up soon, I think. The 12th.
Oh, that's such a great venue. Yeah, it's funny. I just transcribed an interview I did with Adrian Ballou, and he's playing up at the 12th, so it's a pretty cool room. It's very iconic.
Yeah, I think we did a couple of band shows there years ago.
Yeah.
But it looks like we're doing a duo show at the 12th, like July 14th, it looks like.
Oh, very cool. Well, I will.
Come out and say hi.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a week before my birthday, so that's like an early birthday present.
Cool. All right. Well, hit me up and let me know, and we'll get you in there.
Awesome, Dave. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for being so generous with your time, and I'll send this to you when it goes up.
Okay. Cheers. Take it easy, man.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
I know